I'm Dr. Ray Dykes, and this is the Personal Faith Program. This is the sixth in a series of podcasts on personal faith with a passion, how to know what you really believe. This podcast is about which stories about God-like characters told you about God. Which stories about God-like characters told you about God? All your life, you look for God-like figures to tell you who you are and how to act. Role models tell you what life is about. They reassure you that the world is just and safe, or they convince you that it's vicious and horrible. Some of these figures are real and others are fiction. If they're people you admire greatly, you unconsciously attribute to them what you think are godlike qualities. In this podcast, we will move deeper into understanding what you really believe about God as you see how stories have influenced your people's concepts of God. This podcast will help you understand what you hope for in your concept of God and what you most desperately yearn for God to be like. You are invited to think of the characters who are your heroes or heroines in every kind of story you have seen or heard, and the qualities each of these characters displays. Stories are so critically important in determining what you believe, and you have lots of them in your memory. I have included several personal stories in this program to model the importance of remembering, identifying, and interpreting your faith stories. You have stories that are tucked away deep within your brain, and they can function as mirrors to your spirit. These stories also have something to do with what you consider to be godlike qualities. What pictures in your spiritual photo album are taken from the variety of stories you've heard and or seen. In the story of Cinderella, who's the most godlike character? Is it the fairy godmother or the handsome prince? That depends on what were godlike qualities when you first heard that story. What are the godlike qualities in the fairy godmother? Well, the fairy godmother is kind, loving, compassionate, and giving. She hears Cinderella's prayers and feels her pain. She can transform a young woman, mice, and a pumpkin into what they've never been. She does all this with a magic wand. She's helpful. She makes things better. The fairy godmother gives Cinderella what she needs. She's a Shazam god, magic wand and all. Now, why is the handsome prince a godlike character? Well, he makes her feel safe and wanted because he accepts her. When she flees at midnight and he loses her, he begins a relentless pursuit to bring her back into his circle of love. He searches for her, and when he finds her, he loves her for who she is. Both characters have godlike qualities. The one you choose today or the one you chose years ago as the more godlike says a great deal about your clay, your unconscious faith. Where'd that choice come from? Well, here's the story. Poseidon Adventures, a movie released about 25 years ago. It's about a cruise ship that's turned upside down by a huge wave, a tsunami, and is slowly sinking. The passengers and the crew are all trying to get to the bottom of the ship, which is now the highest point and the only section where there's still air to breathe. They're going up the main propeller shaft and they're getting close to the top. Almost there, and what happens? They run into the last of many obstacles. There's a jet of scalding steam going across their path. The little band of survivors can't get through that. When the Episcopal minister figures out that there's a gate valve which controls the steam jet, he jumps over there, catches on that gate valve, turns it, and stops the steam. But now he can't get back to the propeller shaft. So he eventually loses his grip and falls to his doom, and the last of the survivors can make it through to their rescue to the strain of "There Has to Be a Morning After." And there you have a picture of sacrifice as a godlike quality. In the literature of the human race, in movies, television, there are stories of heroes, heroines, and godlike persons. Some of the stories are biography, some are fiction. When you read them or saw them, they presented to you individuals you admire greatly even today. Bible stories, fables, children's stories, comics or animation, novels, history, biographies, they're all possibilities for places to discover persons or groups of people that exemplify godlike qualities. As you define godlike qualities at any point in your experience, what are the stories that have influenced you the most? The stories. Secondly, who are the heroes and heroines in those stories? These individuals manifest personal qualities that you consider to be wonderful. These should be people you don't know personally. The point is to look at what is significant to you about these people and how that relates to your concept of God. All right, the stories, the people. Thirdly, what are the qualities that these people display? For example, if you were to name the movie The Prince of Egypt, a person would be Moses, and the qualities would be faith or leadership. These are possible godlike qualities of Moses. A well-known biblical story illustrates what this program is all about. It's about a man who came to understand what he really believed and the impact that had on him. It's a story of Jacob and Esau. It's a long story. I'll cut to the chase. Jacob and Esau, born as twins. Esau first. Jacob looked up to Esau and formed in Esau his idea, his concept of God formed. And his concept of Esau was that Esau was big, dumb, and powerful. So his concept of God was that God was big, dumb, and powerful. So Jacob figured he could cheat Esau, and he did, and he could cheat God. And this went on because then he cheated his brother. He cheated his father-in-law, and finally he has to confront his brother, who has sworn to kill him. And at the brook Jabbok, it's a very heart-rending situation where instead of Esau killing Jacob, he runs to him and picks him up out of the dust and hugs him and kisses him and forgives him. And in that process, Jacob takes his brother Esau's face in his hands and says to him, "In your face, my brother, I see the face of God." And he named that place Peniel, which means the face of God, because he said, "I've seen the face of God." Now, what happened that day there to Jacob? Well, his name was changed to Israel. He got a new concept of God. Instead of God being big, dumb, and powerful, God is now loving, forgiving, accepting, caring, willing to disgrace himself even to show love for his brother. That's a very different concept than the one he started with that day. Well, what had happened in the meanwhile? He'd acquired a new name. Name means in Hebrew and Greek your identity. Instead of being Yaakov, Jacob, which means he who follows close behind but wants to jump in front, he had Israel, and Israel means he who wrestles with his concept of God. His identity was changed to Israel. He wasn't who he used to be. At the same time, his concept of God changed. Why did it change? Because he had a new experience. He processed that new clay, mixed it with straw from religious information he'd received before, and made a whole new ton of bricks. So things may have happened with the stories that you knew as a child that continue to make an impact on you. You may have re-encountered your stories while raising your children and reading to them. Look at these stories, examine them in light of new experiences, and process and reprocess them to gain fresh interpretations. If and when you hear a sermon preached on Sunday morning, what do you remember best? It's the stories. You know that, and the preacher knows that. You remember the stories. So dig into your stories and look for your experiences of God. Look for the God images there, for the characters with godlike qualities as you now define godlike qualities. Are there characters in your stories that show up in your spiritual photo album? I did this exercise, in a retreat with a group of middle school students, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. It was one of the most marvelous experiences I've had in my life. They were thinking about movies that they'd seen recently. They could click off, "Oh, there's a godlike quality. Yeah, in that movie, yeah." When we got through with this part, they all said, "We'll never go to the movies again without looking for God in the storyline." That's what you can do. You can look for the symbols. Where are the godlike qualities as you look at the stories you remember? You've got a lot of stories that you've heard or read that are stored in your head. Process the clay of those stories and relate them to your understanding of the nature of God. See you next time.